Good evening, everyone. It's great to see we have a packed room and indeed a few along the sides. So obviously a huge amount of interest in the South Belfast election and the candidates who we have here for you this evening. Now, we're going to be hearing a lot from them, but we're also, I hope, going to be hearing a lot from you in terms of questions. I hope that some of you have got questions prepared that you'd like to ask, and we will try to get answers for you, and I will try to come to the floor as often as we can to take some comments. But we only have an hour, and we need to move through it as quickly as we possibly can because we need to hear from everybody equally. So with no further ado, we will get underway. Now, you're going to hear a little bit, I suppose, what you might call a short pitch from each of the four candidates before us, and then we will move straight away to questions. So, if I could, first of all, invite Paula Bradshaw from the Alliance Party to give us something about her and what she is offering the electorate here in South Belfast.
Okay. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to stand before you this evening as the Alliance Party candidate in this election. The Alliance Party is running 18 candidates on a platform of progressive, inclusive, pro-Remain policies. We are the only party that is challenging the DUP and Sinn Féin everywhere. We do this because we believe in democratic choice, and we believe that PACs further damage community relations and erode trust and confidence between political parties. There are 4 issues that are raised on the doors in this election. They are Brexit, restoration of Stormont, health and abortion, all of which will confront the next MP for South Belfast and Westminster almost immediately. In terms of Brexit, any Alliance MP going to Westminster will be aligning themselves with other pro-Remain MPs and parties to try to secure a people's vote. If this isn't possible because of arithmetic or other technicalities, we will be pushing for the whole of the UK to stay in the single market and customs union. In terms of the restoration of Stormont, we will be putting pressure on the next Secretary of State to not only resume and restore the talks, but also to ensure that a deal is struck between the DUP and Sinn Féin, appointing an independent facilitator if necessary. Over 2 years ago, I worked with all the political parties to develop politically workable proposals to solve the Irish Language Act standoff. These proposals remain valid and should be acceptable to everyone if there is political will and leadership. As the Alliance Party Health spokesperson, I have been beyond frustrated for the last 3 years at the lack of a health minister, health committee and assembly to bring forward legislation. During this time, however, I have been pushing for policy changes as regards to access to cancer drugs, HPV vaccines for adolescent boys, and changes in the environment in hospitals for parents affected by miscarriage, to name but a few. Lastly, as regards abortion, I very much welcome the ongoing consultation as regards the introduction of access to abortion services. I am pro-choice, but I say that in the realms of ensuring that there are more services for women facing crisis pregnancies. So I'd like to close by thanking Queen's for hosting this hustings tonight, and I very much look forward to the panel discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Claire, Hanna, can I ask you, would you like to, your mic, do you think your mic there?
Thank you very much. I think Paula has touched on a lot of the issues, and what we do know is that it is a big moment on Thursday. I think there's the opportunity for a different direction for us here in South Belfast, hopefully a change in the politics in Northern Ireland, and I think further afield in the Parliament, because I think it's fair to say things have not been going well. We've had a depressing few years, and it's been difficult to find things to be hopeful about politically. We know, well, I think many in this room, I hope, would agree with me that there's no good form of Brexit. There's no good way to skin this particular cat, and certainly the will hasn't been there to find that. Certainly for myself and my colleagues, our bottom line will be maximum access to the EU. We very much hope to be able to form a coalition that gets a people's vote, and both Colm Eastwood and I have been endorsed by the People's Vote campaign as people who will go and fight for that. And I compare it to post-1998, after the Good Friday Agreement. The job wasn't done after the agreement was signed. There were years and years of hard work and amendments to legislation and making things fit for purpose and ensuring that the voices of people here were heard in Westminster on those key issues. We know that Brexit isn't the only front. There's a big turning point on public services as well, particularly if the Conservatives do get a substantial majority, and I think we should be very worried about their intentions as regards the National Health Service. The climate emergency looms very large. We are running out of time for meaningful action, and I think that will be a big front in the next Parliament. And of course, restoration of the Assembly here. We've had 1,000 days of political failure, 1,000 days of squandering opportunity, and I know bringing it down was easier than putting it back up, and I know the impression is being given that this place is ungovernable, but we have to realise somebody is governing it. Somebody needs to be making decisions every day, and collectively we have to decide if we want that done in a way that's consistent with values of power sharing and accountable to you and the rest of us as the electorate.
Thank you. Now I ask Michael Henderson from the Ulster Unionist Party to give you his pitch.
Good evening, everybody. This is the most important election in a decade. In the Ulster Unionist Party, when Brexit was announced, it was a free vote. Each of the members in the party could vote whichever way they wanted. When the result of the referendum came out, we decided to follow democracy, and we voted to go along and support the people with what the vote was. On the 2nd of October, however, that all changed when the DUP, with the Prime Minister, agreed to put a regulatory border down the Irish Sea. That was the step too far of the Ulster Unionist Party, and our position now is that we stay in and try and stop the Prime Minister putting that border down the Irish Sea. It will stop us having free trade with the rest of the UK, and it's going to be a disaster for Northern Ireland's small businesses. I'm a member of the local commissioning group here in Belfast, which is basically the Belfast Trust. We commission healthcare for the trusts, and we have been seeing over the last 10 years, I've been a member of it, and we're not recruiting sufficient nurses, we've not enough doctors, and things have been falling apart. And now with the nurses coming out in strike, the party has decided that we should call this a state of an emergency, ask the UK government to step in, appoint a minister, and get involved getting the nurses sorted out. It was the DUP 10 years ago changed the ruling where they took away the parity with the rest of the UK, and our nurses fell behind. That was not acceptable. We had successive healthcare ministers, and they never addressed it. And now our nurses are well behind, and it can be up to £8,000 on some of the grades for nurses, and that's not acceptable. We also complained about the HIU, the Historical Investigation Unit. The way it's been set up at the moment is that anyone who has been injured or lost limbs within the Troubles, the new rules don't permit them to have an inquiry. It's only people who have documented evidence can actually be investigated and reopen investigations. So that's basically the RUC, the Army, or the UDR, and people who have been injured, civilians, will not get a look in. And that's what we are standing against in this election.
Okay, Michael, thank you very much. And Chris. Thank all of you so far as well for sticking to time. Chris McHugh from Aontú, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my name's Chris McHugh, and I'm representing Aontú in South Belfast. Aontú are not just a new party, we're a new movement. We're grassroots and we're people-powered. We're growing across the island. We're less than a year old, and we've already had success in Cavan, Navan, Derry, Wexford, and we've had a councillor join us recently in Dungannon. We're aiming to challenge the establishment at a time of deep crisis. We have 20,000 homeless families here. Not 20,000 homeless people, that's 20,000 families with no home to lay their children. How many families are going to be relying on food banks to provide their Christmas dinner at the turn of the decade, 2019? We have 300,000 people in poverty. The nurses are on strike. The education system's failing. In the space of 10 days, we had 7 people lose their lives to drugs, and the suicide rates are alarming, to say the least. And all this is in despite of a confidence and supply agreement that promised us 50 million for education and 300. Hello?
Going? Yeah.
Yep.
Little blip.
So currently we have deadlock and stalemate, and as has been mentioned, Stormont has been closed for over 1,000 days. Voting for the same parties over and over again is just not working. We're a pluralist party, and we have had people join us from Sinn Féin, SDLP, People Before Profit, the Green Party. We do have unionist and nationalist support because we want to go back into Stormont, because we want to break the deadlock.
Just keep going.
A vote for Aontú is basically to tell those establishment parties that you've had enough, that we've all had enough, and we want the society to work for everybody, regardless of race, creed, sexual orientation, age, gender, or developmental stage. It's time for real change, and we're not going to get it unless we demand it. And what I'm suggesting is that on Thursday we demand it by not voting for the same establishment parties over and over again.
Okay, thank you, Chris. Okay, broad range of issues there highlighted by the candidates. I'd like to invite the first question, and I would say, well, first hand up there, so I'll probably take you first. If you just wait for a microphone to come to you. If you want to identify yourself, fine. If we'd ask, please, for questions and not statements. And we, as I say, we do have just the hour to get through as many as we can. So let's try and give each other a little bit of space and a little bit of time, but let's do it quickly. You're first.
Hello, my name is Rachel Powell, and I'm the Women's Sector Lobbyist for Northern Ireland with the Women's Resource and Development Agency. So it'll be no surprise that my question is related to women. So I would like to ask, what will you and your party do to ensure gender equality rights in Northern Ireland, that they are put on equal footing with other parts of the UK? And just to give you a few examples of where we aren't equal, childcare provisions, a lack of a gender equality strategy, the active promotion of gender neutrality from civil servants, the lack of adequate domestic violence legislation, being excluded from the UK government's UNSCR 1325, National Action Plan for Women, Peace and Security, alongside the disproportionate impact of welfare reform and universal credit on women in Northern Ireland. And I have a copy of the Women's Manifesto with me that I can give to all of you after, but it should have been emailed as well.
Okay, thank you very much. So, first question, looking at gender equality rights. I'm going to start with you, Claire. And
Yes,
if you can
thank
keep
you very
the
much.
answers reasonably short,
I
too.
suppose just to touch on a few of the things you've raised, I think childcare is a massive issue. I co-chair with Chris Little from the Alliance Party an all-party group on childcare, which is designed to use this downtime that we're having at the moment to at least have a good system in place, and that's bringing together childcare providers, trade unions, the women's sector, and looking at it from an aspect of economy and helping people back into the workplace, gender equality, and as an early years tool, because we know that by the time kids get to nursery school, a lot of their educational attainment is set based on the first 1,000 days and the environments that they've been in. So we're trying to use the opportunities of what is and isn't working in terms of newly pioneered things, particularly across the water and down south, and keeping the big pinnacle of a Scandinavian model. Why shouldn't we have it? You know, why shouldn't we? What is more important to invest in than small children? I sit on the Women's Caucus in the Assembly, which is in part a sort of about a network for women legislators and linking with other parliaments as well, and promoting visibility, I suppose, and promoting it as something, engagement with activism and politics that more women will do. But we've also been trying to highlight best practice in things like gender budgeting and some of the good things that are going on in the civil service and that are advancing things, and we'll continue that.
Okay, Chris McHugh.
Yeah, First of all, thank you for your question. I read most of the manifesto today. I am a full-time teacher, so I didn't get time to read the whole thing. But I think you'd agree with me that it's sad reading through it. One of the things that really struck me is the almost discrimination that you're finding between rural areas and urban areas. Knowing somebody that needed the access services in a rural area, it's something that is actually quite important to me. But a big issue we're having is the discrimination in the gender pay gap, and the fact that we have issues around, we expect maternity to fit into a neat little workplaces. In actual fact, we know everybody's maternity journey is independent. So we do need to invest properly in so many different areas, such as childcare. We need to look at how we can help women with their maternity. I know people are calling for specialist doctors that can help employers develop proper policies that does accept that women need an individual journey. But I think the big thing we need is investment, and we need to see Stormont up and running again, and we need to tackle these issues here in the north, where women are currently living and struggling.
Okay. Paula?
Sorry. Thank you, Rachel. And I'd said that we'd meet after Christmas. Well, there's two aspects to it. In terms of the talks that were going on in May and June, which unfortunately, because it sort of ran into summer, they sort of ran into the sand as well. Well, there were two aspects. In the working group on rights, languages and identity, I have proposed that there's an ad hoc committee that is set up at the far side of the executive, and that would be to look in depth at the Northern Ireland Human Rights Commission's annual report on where we in Northern Ireland and as part of the UK are falling behind in terms of our minority rights, and I suppose that's the first part of what you'd asked there. So that certainly is a body of work that will be going forward when we get assemblies up and running. And the other part would be in the Programme for Government working group as part of the talks as well. There were very few aspects that had all five-party agreement around, and one of them was the introduction of a new childcare strategy. So very much what Claire has said there, a lot of the groundwork has been done there, but that would be something in terms of a very early action under the new Programme for Government when we get it back up and running. But just on a policy position, the Alliance Party in our General Election Manifesto there very much supports the call for 30 hours of childcare for children. So there are some positive actions, but again, we need the executive back up and running to push them forward.
Okay, Michael Henderson.
Again, thank you for the question. In local government, I can only speak about local government because I'm a local councillor. We have put in place for childcare for our new councillors, the female councillors. We've put in training to help them develop and know exactly what the time commitment within council is. Because some people come into local government and to government without knowing what the time commitment is. And when you've got children, it's children first and everything else comes second, and that is right and should always be right. I was at a conference 2 weeks ago in England, and 1 in 4 children in Northern Ireland live in poverty. And that's not just because of, you imagine people who are on the bed line and stuff like that. It's changes in circumstances where people have gone out of work, people have started different jobs, and we have been looking at this, and that came from the Joseph Rowntree Foundation, and they gave that report. So yes, totally support it. The party supports it. We try to encourage more women to take up the posts within government. We used to get slagged in the Ulster Unionist Party is that the women were there to make the tea. And now the women are the brains who are telling us all what to do, and we've got them in all the key positions within our party. And that's the way it should be. It should be the person's ability and not the gender should be the decider.
Okay, thank you. Do you want to come back on that, Claire?
Oh,
no. Just catching my eye there, a hopeful look. So, okay, just up at the, just there, yes. Chap with glasses, dark hair. Mostly dark, a bit grey.
Hello, Tom Sullivan, Chartered Society of Physiotherapy for Northern Ireland. We're a professional body and trade union for physiotherapists here. Could I ask the panel what commitment they would give our members who for the first time are being balloted for industrial action here, that they will do all that they can to address the situation where our members find that they are paid less than colleagues in England, Scotland, and Wales for doing exactly the same job?
Okay, well that's a huge question. I'm sure there are other people here in the audience who are perhaps employees of our health and social care service or indeed users of it. So that is the big issue out there, and it's, I'm sure, a huge issue in here. So, Paul, I'm going to start with you on this.
Yeah. Good evening, Tom. As health spokesperson, I've worked with you quite a bit, and I think you do an amazing job. On Friday, Naomi Long, our Alliance Party leader, wrote to all the other party leaders to encourage them to speak to or communicate with Richard Pengelly, the Permanent Secretary of the Department of Health, to say that if they were ministers, health ministers, that they would reintroduce pay parity across the board. I'm not sure how many have responded by now, but I think that we need to give him political cover to move forward with this. As we've been able to do it in terms of getting the cancer strategy over the line, in terms of getting more money for community pharmacists, to get the HPV vaccinations over the line, if we all work together. So there's certainly a mechanism to do it. Even if the talks have to run till the far side of Christmas, I think that the nurses, for example, their date is the 18th of December, so I would like to think that we would be able to get a hasty agreement between the 16th and 17th so that that money could be found and released to prevent the action.
Okay, Claire.
Thanks very much. I suppose the first thing is turning up and acknowledging that there is a problem and that allied health professionals and other health staff are striking now to sound the alarm. And I suppose in any organisation, the culture comes from the top, and the fact that MLAs aren't there and aren't supporting is just so regrettable. And we know that there are decisions mounting up. I mean, I remember Paula and I were both there just before the Assembly collapsed. One of the last items was the presentation of the Bengoa report, and there was unprecedented levels of cooperation. And the chat was, we'll take the politics out of health. But now we've taken health out of politics, and we're not talking about those issues. So one is, and I saw the department or the trust statement on Friday talking about health workers turning up for work. It's us that need to turn up for work in the first instance. I think there is consensus around the five main parties that we will restore parity. I'm not sure of the ins and outs of when and how that was broken, and I understand that the funding for that has been found to within 48 million, which is quite a lot, but clearly a bridge that can be gapped, or a gap that can be bridged in order to, I suppose, with all the things that health workers are worrying about their patients and each other, that they're not worrying about their bills at the same time. But I suppose it is just acknowledging that there's no bigger crisis and that nothing is getting better by staying out of decision making.
Chris McHugh, you have two microphones now, so hopefully one of those will work.
Hopefully you'll be able to hear me here. Look, I think, in fairness to Hanna, she's really hit the nail on the head there. While MLAs are not showing up to work, we're going to see the crisis getting worse and worse. Absolutely, we would be calling for pay parity. As a teacher myself who is also on industrial action, short of strike action, I understand the stresses that you're put under when you're trying to do the job that you want to do, that you love to do, but you can't because of strike action, which you need to take. Again, the issue here is Westminster is obviously not working for us. The confidence in supply agreement, as I said, I think it was 300 million was meant to be for healthcare in general. We're not seeing the benefit of that money. So I think, again, as Claire has said, it's time that the MLAs are getting back to work, that we are getting storming up and running, and that we are working together to make sure that the system is funded and that those that are doing the work exactly the same as their colleagues across the water are receiving fair pay.
Okay. Michael, I think your party has been calling for Westminster to actually take action here and never mind the Assembly, or lack of Assembly.
That's right. Steve has written to the Secretary of State saying this should be declared a national emergency for Northern Ireland, that it's got too far down the line now. It's coming into Christmas. We've got the winter viruses coming out. We have norovirus, which hits at this time. We have the flu and the vomiting and the diarrhea, all hits at this time of year. And he's called in the Secretary of State to declare this an emergency, appoint a minister from the UK and get this sorted. We're calling for parity right away, and we can't wait for Stormont to come up and running. Yes, everyone's saying there's going to be talks on the 16th. We've had talks, they've all failed, and we cannot take that chance on our healthcare, and we're calling for it to be rectified right away.
Okay. Right, more hands up. You had yours up there at the front, so we could take a quick question here.
Hello, my name is Brigitte Anton. I can't even vote here. I'm an EU national, and my question is, what do you plan to do to make us EU nationals feel that we are welcome here, and other migrants, and that this is our home, especially in the light of the very racist statements made by the present PM today? So that's my question. What do you plan to do to make migrants feel that this is their home?
Okay, good question, thank you. Start with you, Michael.
The beauty about South Belfast is that we are a mixed culture, and we pride ourselves on it. We have more diverse cultures in Belfast South than any part of Northern Ireland. I used to be in Lisburn and Castlereagh, and we were proud because we had the biggest Chinese community living within the area, and it's important that everyone is made feel welcome. At the moment, the councils are actually got plans, like again in Lisburn, we brought over 300 Romanians and rehoused them, and it was everything. We had to get the schools up and working, the healthcare up and working. It was getting all the ducks in a row, and it was how you get our own community to accept new, and that was the hardest part. And we were expecting it. We had the police and everything on our side. But it all fell into place quite easy, and everyone's working well together. And it's getting people to be open to change and accepting people for who they are and what they can bring. And that's the beauty about it. You can learn from other people. And I think that's the beauty about South Belfast. We have so much of a cultural diversity.
Okay, Paula?
Well, I think one of the biggest travesties in this actual election is the fact that the EU nationals can't vote in it, because obviously the outcome at the far side of it's going to affect you so much. So I suppose any MPs going to Westminster are going to have to fight very hard for any legislative changes at the far side of that around voting and other accommodation going forward. So I suppose it comes back then to the Northern Ireland Assembly in terms of how we then make sure that you feel part of what we are offering here, and very much that would reflect into the likes of language classes, things that we are devolved powers like language classes and accommodation, and other ways of like celebrating your culture with and incorporating it into ours. So I suppose there is a body of work at Westminster and then one here in the Northern Ireland Assembly, but also then the councils, as Michael said there, that in terms of the community projects and stuff. So that's what we would be very much about, trying to tackle it at all three levels.
Claire, we know that quite large numbers of EU nationals have gone back to their home countries really since the Brexit vote. So this is a really big issue for many residents in South Belfast.
Absolutely, Bridget. You know we have a working group. There's lots of working groups in Stormont, and none of work with me and all the Steves, Aiken, Barry, and Agnew. And because we do know that there's already people are feeling an impact. People are choosing to maybe leave people who had made Northern Ireland their home because of an uncertainty about their future, and that people are getting chill in work. Their boss going, well, can I give you that promotion? Are you even going to be allowed to be here next year? Or landlords saying the same thing, and just anxiety about the rights that people have. And we know that Brexit was such a shock to that. I say this as somebody who campaigned extensively before Brexit, and my literature is still online on my website that said very clearly that immigration and inward migration to Northern Ireland is an enrichment economically and culturally. Our big immigration problem is that young people feel the need to leave. It's not the smaller numbers of people coming this way, and Brexit has undermined that confidence. So from early on, we've been trying to set out what is needed for people who've come here to feel protected and safe and secure and informed about their future, and what's going to work for employers economically. Unfortunately, it's one of the things that is out of our hands, and it is going to be set in Westminster, and it's all the more reason to have people from here who understand and have bought into the needs of EU nationals, and also how they relate here in society and the economy.
Okay, and Chris.
So, first of all, you are welcome. And if anybody in society is making you not feel welcome, that I find to be incredibly sad, because South Belfast would not be South Belfast without the likes of yourself. As everybody has said, South Belfast is so diverse and it's beautiful. One of the things that we need to make sure is that the people, I appreciate that unfortunately you wouldn't have the vote, but we need to make sure that the people are not voting for a party that are going to prop up the Tory government with a Brexit policy that does not sit well for those people that are already living and working in our community. So yeah, what we need to do is we need to make sure that we're not propping up that government. We need to make sure that we are getting back to work here so that we are able to protect the people that are living here, regardless of where they've come from or wherever they call home. If they're in South Belfast, they need to be protected, they need to be made feel welcome. And the politicians in England, Scotland and Wales are not responsible for that. We need to be making sure we're creating a society where everybody feels welcome back here.
Okay, thank you. All right, well, loads of hands up. So you there in the sort of pink short sleeve shirt, pink, purple. Okay.
Hi, my name is David McCaffrey and I'm a medical student here at Queen's. So we've talked significantly even tonight about health, but how would you propose ensuring that medical students and other young healthcare students stay and work here? Because we can invest as much as we can into the NHS, but many students are leaving as soon as they graduate to go to Australia or elsewhere. So how do we encourage students to stay and to work here?
Okay, thank you. Are there any other healthcare or health system specific questions about what's currently going on? Anything around the Bengoa reforms, that type of thing? Anything specifically health? Yes. So what we'll do is we'll take those together. Where was that hand?
Hi, I'm James, also a medical student at Queen's. With 3,000 nursing vacancies and nearly half of people who are waiting for an inpatient appointment being more than 1 year, how much worse does the healthcare system have to get before we declare it that it has collapsed and that we need radical reforms in order to keep the NHS free at the point of service and equally accessible to all?
Okay. Okay, so I'm going to ask you to address both of those. How do we keep our healthcare professionals once they've trained, once they've graduated? How do we keep them here and persuade them that this is a good health and social care system in which to pursue the rest of their careers? And also around Bengoa, obviously the reforms which all of the parties in the executive signed up to before it collapsed brought about some very hard decisions that would have to be made around closures of units and changes in the way that things are done. So as our questioner is asking, are we now at the point of actually collapse and crisis where these radical reforms are needed, and some of those are going to be difficult? So can we just go round the panel with that, and I'll start with you, Paula.
Okay, well, thanks very much. As I said in my opening remarks, I'll be the Alliance Party Health spokesperson. So I've met with the likes of the BMA and Royal College GPs and stuff, so in many ways I'm quite across the detail of the issues. I would say that we would be in support of the graduate entry medical school up in Foyle, up in Derry. I think that would be a really good thing, that we could maybe have an early win when the executive gets up and running, so that we could start getting people into the west of the country, because I think that's where a lot of the acute pressures are within the system. But just really to take up your point there, we need our executive, we need our health minister. Part of the problem, I think, in terms of the health and wellbeing delivering together strategy, which is the response to Bengoa from the Department of Health, has really been that a lot of the small wins, the easy stuff, has been delivered so far under the Transformation Implementation Group, but the reality of it is the big decisions have not been introduced, and that's where they're not just about cost savings, a lot of them are actually about better patient outcomes, but that's where the stuff around workforce planning, remuneration, training, better diagnostics, better facilities, that's where all those decisions are being discussed. And unfortunately, because we don't have a health committee, as I said in my opening remarks again, there's a lack of transparency around the decision making, and there's a lack of accountability as to where the confidence and supply money went, for example. That was really meant to be about stabilising the health service and then moving moving the transformation agenda forward, and we're seeing scant evidence of that to date. So I suppose in some ways what we have to do is get all our health spokespersons together. Again, in the talks process, what we said was that quarterly we would meet and sort of discuss sort of off committee, if you know what I mean, just behind the scenes, and say, are we confident that we're doing enough in mental health? Are we confident we're doing enough in workforce planning? We're confident enough we're doing in a wide range of issues, because we do try to be quite collegiate around it. But again, we need our health minister there, that we can then, as 5 health spokespersons, go and present what we think is going wrong. But the issue around, for example, the reconfiguration of stroke services or the breast assessment centres and other reconfiguration processes, the Department of Health have only been able to take them as far as they can. They would need policy sign-off. And so I think that it's great regret that we haven't been able to push those forward.
Michael, I know you mentioned earlier you are involved in health commissioning, I think. But how are we going to keep young medical graduates like this in the country, and what are we going to do about these reforms that Paula has referenced?
It's frustrating if you're in the medical profession. We've had 3 reports in Northern Ireland. The Bengola report was the last, and the other 2 weren't acted on either. The Bengola report looks at structures and what we should be doing in terms of changing the way in which we offer services. 20 years ago, Northern Ireland was the place for any medical profession, because with the Troubles, believe it or not, we had people who were specialised in everything you could think of. Since the Troubles has ended, we're back into normal medicine, and we don't have the same type of procedures you would have in the troubled areas, but we still have centres of excellence. We're still the centre of excellence for stroke, for heart disease, for diabetes, and we specialise these. And this is what the Bengola report was trying to do. Let's not offer these services in every single hospital, because we built new hospitals, and unfortunately no one wants to move them. And we built Downpatrick, and no one wanted to move out of Belfast to go and actually offer their services down there. And the same with Enniskillen, brand new hospital, state of the art. And again, we couldn't get the professionals who actually wanted to leave Belfast. Everyone wants everything to be in Belfast, and they want to stay in Belfast. But there are lots of different opportunities for medical students within Northern Ireland. It's about picking the right discipline. Again, we have GPs, we have a shortage in GPs, and we cannot recruit them. And we've been trying from everywhere to get people to come back in to do GP. But it is important, that we keep and retain the people we have. And there are specialties out there where you can excel in. And the problem is, once people start to excel, then they go where the money is. The money isn't here in Northern Ireland. We do not pay our professionals the proper pay, and they tend to go to England, Australia, and further afield. And it's how we can keep the brain drain once you're trained to actually stay here.
Okay, Chris?
Yeah, this is happening in so many fields. Again, I'm a teacher, and so many people that I trained with have left to go to Dubai, Qatar, Australia, or across the water to England, Scotland, Wales. There is an issue here where we are not funding the healthcare system and we're not paying our staff. So why wouldn't they go somewhere else where they're going to get paid more? For those that are staying here, the stress and the workload is so high that those that are staying here are then leaving the profession as well. Now, one of the other candidates running for Aontú is a GP, he's a doctor, so obviously healthcare is something that's very, very important for us. We need to get the reforms through. We need to set up a system that works. We need to support our nurses, our doctors, those who work in the healthcare system. One of the first steps to that is increasing the pay so that they are being paid equivalent to what they're seeing across the water. And that's the first step to getting our young doctors and other professionals to stay here. And I'm sorry for being a broken record. We need to get Stormont back up and running if we are going to see the changes that we need. So when we were voting in this Westminster election, when you're voting in this Westminster election, understand that when the DUP has what they see as power in Westminster, they have no encouragement to get Stormont back up and running. Why would they? So we as a people need to vote again for a party that is not going to prop up the Westminster Tory government, so that we can see Stormont back up and running, so that we can help our young professionals in all fields, and specifically in the healthcare, since we know it is at a stage of collapse at this stage.
Okay, thank you. And finally on that, Claire, could you maybe pick up as well on the questioner up here who said, we're at the point where some very sharp reforms, some very hard decisions need to be made about these major reforms, but a lot of people don't want to see unit closures, and a lot of MPs, MLAs don't want to see unit closures.
Of course, and where the axe falls is always going to be challenging. We're here in South Belfast, where the A&E closed at City Hospital temporarily a few years ago, and I know at the time, I remember I was a councillor, not an MLA, and you do try and be mature about it and not be populist on it, but I don't think that the service had expanded to fill it in the way that we were told. We know that there's been a consultation on breast services from the city that just doesn't seem to match up to the Bengoa principles. So, you want to support them, but they also need to make sense clinically and in terms of the service that will be delivered. But, as well as on top line, it is austerity, and 10 years of it haven't helped in the health service. And statistics like, we've never funded the NHS so much, aren't true. As a percentage of GDP, its share is falling, and we aren't doing enough in terms of health promotion and environmental changes and lifestyle changes. But there are very few problems in the health service that don't somehow come back to workforce planning here, in terms of money being spent on agency and bank staff and lack of supply of medical professionals. Indeed, yes, a graduate medical school, because we know we could be doing with a whole other year, a whole other intake of doctors, of medical students each year. Nursing, restoring the bursary, the amount of hours of free labour that young nurses give, and promoting other careers in other aspects of health, including mental health. But clearly it's about reducing the acute pressures. I was speaking to GPs, and I'd been working with their surgery to try and get them a bit of extra space so that they could accommodate a student each year, or a GP placement. But they say, getting young people to take that on, because they're going, this place is nuts. I will be driven nuts. I won't be able to have anything approaching a work-life balance. So we're driving people out because of the chaos and because of the anxiety that health professionals are experiencing, trying to hold up a system. So we have to remove that, or people will say, I can go across the water where waiting lists are 70% lower, or I can go to Australia for a few years. So it's, I suppose, removing the acute pressures. It's also a societal problem. We want, in all professions and not just in health, although it's more, the failure is writ large in health, but it's about making this place a better society and the kind of place where bright young people want to stay and live and build their careers.
Okay, thank you. All right, got a hand up here, Morris, just there, yes, with glasses. There you go.
Thanks. I'm Dakota, I'm a Queen's student. Claire, you mentioned it briefly. I think the main issue in this election should be climate. It should be the environment. So if each of the candidates wouldn't mind saying what changes, and they need to be radical changes, let's face it, you would make to address the climate crisis.
Okay, thank you. We're actually quite well through before climate question has popped up, and we haven't talked a lot about climate this evening. So I'm going to start with you, Michael. I know each of you may have different targets on carbon neutral. I think not all the parties are aligned on this, so let's hear everybody's targets as well and what you're actually proposing to do.
We have a manifesto about zero emissions by, I think it's 2030. What we've done in local government, it's all about training, and you need to train our population in what we're trying to do. It's no use you've got half of the population actually going out and recycling and looking after the environment, and the other one basically buying things and throwing them away. We had it with one of our radio presenters years ago when we tried to first bring this out, where we were asking people to recycle. And he said, there's no way I'm going to wash out cans and start doing your job for you. So we actually sent off to the government saying that we actually pay the BBC and the presenters as the public, and we're trying to create a society where we're going to try and recycle and cut down waste and have energy efficient everything. And you've got one of your presenters actually coming out and saying he's not doing it, encouraging people to go against it. And the same person then had to go out and do a TV programme on actually how to recycle. And it was a wake-up call for everyone. We've tried this across the UK as well. For example, one of the councils have said that they were going to go electric vehicles, and it was in Leeds. And when we've asked the question, how many electric vehicles do you have yourselves? They didn't have any. How many charging points do you have? We don't have any. But what they've done is they've stopped everything going through the town, and it's only electric vehicles are permitted to go through the town. So it's basically looking at the basic steps, and we need to be doing it together. Local government has been leading the way in this. And we're waiting for a minister to be appointed so we can take it further. The frustration is with everything is that it goes so far and then we don't have a minister. We've tried the recycling, we're doing composting, and we're doing it for the house. The best thing we've done is we've been into schools and we've taught the kids, and the kids are training the parents, and it's becoming more of a normal thing to do. We found in England that we started to just, if you do gimmicky things like frogs, bins outside schools, kids were throwing the tins into the frogs because it made a noise, and we were collecting more and more recyclable rubbish that way. And it's been using the schools to actually educate the parents, and that's what we're trying to do. Okay. But it has to come with everyone doing it, from local government, through the house, and then on out. You just can't set a target and say we're going to do that.
All right. Chris, you are a teacher, so you know that this movement is being driven very much from children, and children at quite a young age are maybe more engaged than people in power are with this issue.
Yeah, education is massive in this issue. And I am absolutely amazed by the young people that are getting involved. I'm absolutely loving the fact that when we did have the climate strike a few weeks back there, that there were schools that got behind that, and the whole school closed and went, yeah, okay, let's get on board for this. Education is massive. But there's a culture issue as well that needs to be dealt with. Fast fashion is a massive problem in our society today. So people will go out and they'll buy an outfit and they'll wear it once and then they'll never wear it again. Then they'll go out on another night out and they'll buy another outfit and they'll throw it out. So we have an issue with culture, and I personally do think that the schools are where we're going to tackle that, because we need to educate people from a very young age to understand the importance of looking after their future. But at the same time, we need to take responsibility at our, we do need to see more in the way of recycling, but we do need to get together and have a discussion. So for example, I know this is awful, but there was obviously the fire at Primark, and that led to the city centre being pedestrianised for a while. And I thought, that's brilliant, that's amazing, because that's going to help. But then, of course, there was issues with that around accessibility for people who needed to access certain stores. So, do you see what I mean? We need a group discussion where people can bring all the ideas together.
Okay.
And that's what the parties need to do.
Thanks. Claire, we obviously had the world leaders, meeting on this, the people in power worldwide in Madrid recently. They're coming to Glasgow, is it, for the next one? How can I suppose people at this level feed up to what these world leaders need to do on climate?
Well, I think actually it's the other way around. I think the world leaders probably need to match where people are. Somebody was on this Facebook 10 years ago, me and I think at least one other person in the room were in Copenhagen marching and at what was a big moment for climate action then. At the time I was working for Concern, and I worked in Zambia and in Bangladesh when climate change was real then for people in 2005, 6, 7, 8, and we haven't caught up on that action. Brexit, I suppose, is the front line in terms of environmental protections. I don't trust the Johnson government as far as I could throw them not to race to the bottom on a lot of those protections that are coming from Europe, to have binding targets and I suppose some level playing field on businesses, so that you're not relying on businesses kind of, wanting to stretch themselves, that they're all held to standards around things like clothing production and on their packaging and on their logistics. And yes, a complete rethink of marketing and just our culture of stuff. And I suppose that's a societal conversation. But here, some of the low-hanging fruit is transport, because we need to get a lot more radical, and we can do. And there are a lot of people who want to use public transport, who want to cycle, who want to walk, and we're not meeting them halfway in terms of the costs, in terms of safe cycling routes. And there will be so many health benefits to that in terms of reducing congestion, reducing the amount of time people are stuck in traffic jams, reducing air quality, and we're really not doing the basics well on that at all. I know in Belfast City Council, to the extent that they can, they're leading beyond their authority, trying to, I suppose, do the things that they can do. And I know one of my colleagues has proposed a climate audit of decisions, that basically when they are making a big ticket decision about investment or a policy, that there will be a column on the thing that, what is the environmental impact long term here of this road layout or of this service. And I think that's what it's going to do. We're going to have to not go, that's a next term problem or that's a next year problem, because really the action does have to be now.
Okay. Paula. I think your party is 2030 for going carbon neutral. Mm-hmm. Is that achievable? And back to what our questioner said, what sort of radical measures need to be taken to bring that manifesto promise a reality?
Well, absolutely. I suppose very much concur with what the other candidates have been saying there around the sort of council assembly up to Westminster. So what we would be pushing for would be the next government to actually make more systemic changes in terms of its policies and how it's going to address these issues, because I think that unless they put a real focus in on it, then it will get left behind. In the talks again in May and June, what we were pushing for was a new outcome measure under this new outcomes-based accountability, the new way for programme for government to be delivered, and that would be around climate change measures. And that means again that anything that comes forward through the Assembly would have to be proofed to make sure that there wasn't a negative impact, and in many ways was going to a certain degree to actually start addressing the issues that are going forward. I put a post up on social media, my Facebook page, about 6 weeks ago, and said I was going to write to the Permanent Secretary of the Department for Infrastructure, and I don't think I've ever had a post that has exploded so much. I basically said, look, enough's enough with these small measures around, a few double yellow lines here and a few speed bumps there, and ask them what their overall plan was for dealing with congestion, parking, lack of public transport. So I have quite a comprehensive response, but again, a lot of it comes down to policy changes and funding. I'm incredibly frustrated that the Carried Off Greenway is again sitting there to be signed off. We need 10.5 million on that. There's the bridge over from the gasworks over to the back of the sort of ozone there on the River Lagan. Again, that's sitting ready to go forward as soon as the money's released. So, look, we can deliver really good projects in South Belfast that starts easing the issues here, but again, we need an infrastructure minister to take them forward. But I think that this stuff is there to happen, and obviously through education as well. There's plenty of things we could be doing as a society.
Okay. I'm very cautious, or very much aware of time, but are there any questions which don't cover the areas which we've already answered? Hands shoot up around the room. Yourself at the front, and then we'll try and take one further back. And I can't overrun, unfortunately, too far, but there's so many people here and so many questions. So go ahead.
Thanks so much. My question, a number of people have called this election one of the most toxic in a long time. We've heard words like sectarianism and PACs and threats to candidates. So I was wondering if you could each comment on that, and also how do we make politics better?
Okay, it's a really good question. Can we just take a very brief answer, a couple of sentences, 2-3 sentences from each of you on that so that we can scoop up a couple more before the end? And we'll just start and work along. Paula.
Yeah, no, I totally agree with you. I don't think I've ever been in standing an election that has been so toxic and divisive, and it's been incredibly nasty and gratuitous from a lot of people on social media. So I've really been going on, putting stuff on and coming back off again. I think there was a motion went through council, was it last week, Claire? I think maybe your party supported it, around how we better protect people in public life on social media. So I suppose there's the measures there. It's really, in some ways, it's how they police it in terms of Twitter and Facebook and stuff, but I suppose in some ways it's really just about trying to create a better atmosphere between the political parties, because if we can all sort of stand together and stand, especially whenever like a woman's appearance is attacked or anything like that, if we can all sort of show a wee bit of solidarity, I think it would go a long way.
Claire?
Yeah, it has, in terms of the framing of it and in terms of, banners being hung and so on. But I tell you one thing, and I've been, I know politicians always say this, but literally knocking hundreds of doors every single day for the last 7 weeks, and it is not what people are telling us on the doors. I mean this quite genuinely. What is coming up is Brexit, which I think transcends every other and people's constitutional preference. It is childcare, it is the climate, it is the National Health Service, the National Health Service, the National Health Service. So there's just a real mismatch on how people are framing it, and I just genuinely, we've had a lot of elections in the last few years, and this is the one that, in some ways, on the ground, I feel is post-sectarian. Nobody is bringing up nationalism or unionism or being other. It's just, wanting to move forward together. So I suppose the best thing we can do for politics is to try and match that. And I believe that the parties, unfortunately neither of whom are here, who have the responsibility for forming an executive, will be hearing that as well. But I suppose all of us can do things like not monstering your opponent. I suppose acknowledging that while you disagree with them, they're not always evil, except a few small number over there, but across the water. And I suppose committing to I suppose truth and honesty in your and I suppose engaging with people more. But I actually have felt really hopeful in the last 6 weeks when you turn off the noise of Twitter and people calling you this and that, and genuinely the conversation that you're having, people have moved on. I've moved past all this.
That was more than 3 sentences, but Michael, can you keep it snappy? And Chris, off you go.
I would agree with what's been said by Claire. I was out on Saturday, and the reaction from people in the door is not like any other election. People have concerns about the health service. They have concerns about Brexit. They're worried what's going to happen if the Prime Minister gets back in, and they're saying we need to get the people in there to stop them. And that's, the 4 of us are here all saying that as well. I think from the Joe Cox thing, it let us know how vulnerable politicians can be. And social media will be social media. You have the faceless people who will always attack you. We're politicians, we're used with it, and it doesn't deter us, and I don't think it will. But, it isn't orange and green this time, and that is a good feeling we're having from out there.
Do you concur, Chris? It's not orange and green?
Politics is toxic. It's got to a stage where if I disagree with you, we're enemies. We're not just people having a conversation, and that's problematic. But on the doorsteps, I am shocked at how little I am experiencing the orange and green thing, which is great. I think if you want to combat the toxicity of politics, you have to remember that everybody in this stage wants to do their job to the best of their ability. We just disagree with how certain things should be done or what the best way forward is. And that doesn't mean that we're enemies, and it doesn't mean that you have to disagree or be our enemies, or, we just need to remember that everybody wants to get to the same point, and we just want to get there because we think a different route is the best route.
Okay, thank you. Right, I'm going to take one final question. I think up at the back there, Morris, just beside you, there's a hand up, and then I'm afraid we can't take any more, but go ahead quickly,
Make
please.
it a good one.
Make it a good question.
Well, I'll try to. Good evening. I was thinking about the border in the Irish Sea, which has only been touched on briefly tonight. How much of a danger to the United Kingdom do the panellists think that represent? I would have liked to ask Emma Pengelly, but she's not here.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, so the border down the Irish Sea and what you're asking what sort of a threat that represents to the United Kingdom. You mean in terms of, will it hasten the breakup of the United Kingdom? And brings us to the question then of a border poll. So again, very briefly, because we are pressing on Queen's allocated time. So I shall go the other way, Chris, and then to the end, please, and very brief.
Yeah, so obviously we oppose the Tory Brexit policy at the moment, but we actually believe that the best thing for this island is that the people of this island are making the decisions. So at the moment, our representation in Westminster, from a percentage basis, is too low to actually make a difference. And we do actually think that having representation in the Dáil is the way forward. Is the Tory Brexit policy a threat to the breakup of the United Kingdom? I suppose it is. You've got the SNP saying that it's an issue. You've got parties here saying that it's an issue. I'm not sure. I mean, again, from our point of view, we do think that a new All-Ireland nation would be the best way forward, specifically with Brexit damaging the relationship between the North and the South as it stands.
Okay, Michael?
The border down the Irish Sea is the biggest threat to the United Kingdom since the formation of Northern Ireland. In the 2nd of October, when it was agreed by the DUP, they were going to put a regulatory border down the Irish Sea to look at what they thought was looking at animals and the movement of livestock. That gave the Prime Minister his direction. He got a signature, and that's all he needed, and he jumped at the chance to change the rules. He came here, told the DUP there will never be a foreign border down the Irish Sea, and within 2 weeks it was there. This will separate us from the rest of our biggest market for export. It's going to bog down small businesses and having to fill in forms and claim back money. The example we were given, I'm in business and we are export, and we went to a talk, and basically it's £56 to fill the forms in. You have to fill the form in to prove that the product is staying in the UK. It came from the UK and it didn't come from the Republic of Ireland. Once you've filled the forms in, you pay your £56 with your goods and away you go. Once it's stamped and confirmed, you can claim the money back. But to do that takes hours, and it's having the people on the ground to actually fill the forms out. If you're sending a container over and it's going to multiple customers, it's multiple forms, and it's just going to drag the small businesses down and kill them off.
Okay, Claire?
Well, it's a threat to all of us, regardless of whether you have a constitutional preference or whether you don't. And I think, if it is about the threat to the union, people will scratch their heads in years to come and wonder what on earth the DUP have been at for the last 3 years, because it has undoubtedly injected a massively changed dynamic into that discussion. And particularly people like myself, who I'm more than happy to say I intended to spend the next 25 years making Northern Ireland work on the common ground, focusing on the economy and reconciliation here, and the comfort of being in the UK when it was, not isolationist and it was outward looking and it was broadly social democratic has been removed. And as you see Britain's politics moving to the right and public services falling down the agenda, and then you see an economically dynamic republic plus, social progressivism and so on, it is putting that choice in front of us. And I think we should all get a tattoo of this. Constitutional change does not solve all your problems, and Brexit has shown us that very, very clearly. And whether it was Brexit or whether it's the border poll or whether it's defending the union, it has been used for too many years by politicians who want to distract from the fact that in the here and now they're not doing anything to improve your life. And it has to be about protecting people's interests and their services and their economic possibilities in the here and now, regardless of the name over the door. And there's no path to doing that without taking the pain and the wounding out of Brexit and about working on relationships here.
Thank you. Okay. Paula, you're getting the last word from the panel this evening.
Okay, well, thank you. I suppose the most frustrating thing, especially here in South Belfast, is that the fact that the DUP MP who's represented this constituency for the last few years has done so appallingly and has not taken cognizance of small businesses, academia, the healthcare professionals, in terms of the issues that they were saying were going to be catastrophic in terms of pushing forward with the hard Brexit. And it was very then disappointing. Obviously, then Sammy Wilson, just in October, then started, the light bulb went on that he had realised that this was actually going to be a catastrophic mistake. So I suppose what we have to do then, whoever the MP, hopefully it'll be a pro-Remain MP, will be going, and that they will be able to then try and mitigate against the damage from this. As I said, we would be pushing for a people's vote, and a feeling that then we would be looking for staying within the customs union or single market, and if not, then a special deal for Northern Ireland, because we have to protect our unique circumstances here in terms of the open borders, in terms of our EU nationals coming here, and even just about our whole economy and how we live and we have enjoyed through the peace process since the Good Friday Agreement. So it's just very disappointing that people who before the referendum were saying that these things were going to happen, that it was going to be a threat to the union, they didn't take heed of it, and we're now in this mess now, and people are now having to eat their words on that. So I suppose from our point of view, Naomi Long's been really trying to work really hard in Brussels to sort of remind people of our peace agreement here and how important the reconciliation process is. So there's certainly still work to do, regardless of the outcome on Thursday, in terms of how we mitigate against any damage.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, we are unfortunately out of time. I think we could have probably talked for a lot longer, and I'm sure there's areas we haven't touched on, questions, and I apologise that we didn't get to all of you. I think all of our panellists this evening, just reflecting the question that we had from the front row a short time ago, have shown that it is possible to have debate, that it is possible to have different views and different policies and still be friendly and be civil and be warm. And I think we certainly have had no toxicity in our debate and discussion this evening, and that's great. So please, could you thank our panellists? Thanks to all of you for coming, and safe home. Thank you.